He fought more than 100 battles and lost none of them. So why did the empire that Khalid ibn al-Walid built turn around and erase him from its own story? By the traditional accounts, he never lost, not once. The Persians threw army after army at him and lost every time. The Eastern Roman Empire, the great power of the age, met him on open ground and walked away without Syria. His own soldiers called him Saif Allah al-Maslul, the drawn sword of God. And for the rest of his fighting life, that sword did not break. Then the ruler he had won an empire for took the sword out of his hand, not after a defeat, because there was no defeat. He removed him at the peak, with the enemy still bleeding. So here is the puzzle this whole story turns on. How do you bury the one man who never lost? The strangest part of the legend is where it begins. The man who became Islam's sharpest weapon first made his name killing Muslims. Go back to the year 625 to a hill outside Medina called Uhud. The young Muslim community is fighting the army of Mecca, and for most of the day they are winning. Then the Meccan cavalry on the right wing finds a gap, wheels in behind the Muslim lines, and turns a near victory into a slaughter. The man commanding that cavalry is Khalid ibn al-Walid. He reads the battlefield faster than anyone standing on it, and he punishes the one mistake the Muslims make all day. They lose. The Prophet Muhammad himself is wounded in the fighting. It was the worst day the Muslims had yet suffered, and the man most responsible for it was the same man who would later carry their banner farther than any general before him. A few years later, Khalid converts to the very faith he had bled, and the instinct that had broken the Muslims at Uhud now belonged to them. By tradition, it was the Prophet himself who gave him the title, a drawn sword of God. Sit with what that means. The deadliest enemy they had ever faced was now the blade turned outward, pointed at everyone else. Rome and Persia just did not know yet that the problem had switched sides. Walaja, the year 633, southern Iraq. Khalid is now leading Muslim armies against the Sasanian Empire of Persia, and at Walaja he does something that commanders still study. He sets his center to absorb a Persian charge head on, then springs two hidden wings of cavalry from behind the flanks and folds the Persian army in on itself from both sides at once. A double envelopment. The same trap Hannibal sprang on Rome at Cannae 8 centuries earlier, and the modern biographer A.I. Akram, in his life of Khalid, draws that comparison directly. Most generals go a whole career without landing it once. Khalid treated it as a tool. It was not a fluke of one afternoon either. Across the Iraqi campaign, he won engagement after engagement, by the traditional reckoning, never once handing the Persians a victory to build on. If he had stopped in Iraq, he would still sit in the books as a fine field commander and nothing more. He did not stop. Pay attention to what he does next, because it is the move that put him in front of Rome. In the year 634, the Muslim front in Syria is collapsing and needs him fast. The direct roads are watched. So Khalid takes his army off the map, straight across a stretch of waterless desert that everyone agreed could not be crossed. By the old Arabic accounts, al-Tabari's among them, he had his men deny their camels water, then let them drink their fill, and use the animals themselves as living water tanks for the crossing. Whether every detail of that is literal, the outcome is not in question. He came out of the desert where no Roman thought an army could appear, and he came out on time. An undefeated record looks like luck until you watch a man build the conditions for it himself. That crossing is why, 2 years later, the Eastern Roman Empire would have to deal with Khalid in person. And Rome did not lose to clever traps in those days. For generations, it had been the wall the desert broke against. Rome lost to almost no one. If you want more commanders who should be household names and somehow are not, subscribe. Redoubt finds you a new one every few days. By August of the year 636, Khalid stood on a dusty plain in the south of Syria, beside a river called the Yarmouk, in country slashed open by deep ravines that drop away without warning. Facing him was the largest army the Eastern Roman Empire had put in the field in years, sent by the Emperor Heraclius, who had stayed north to throw the Muslims back into the desert for good. The battle did not last an afternoon, it ran for 6 days. 6 days of charge and countercharge across that broken ground. The Roman line heaving forward, the Muslim line bending and refusing to snap. Most commanders would have emptied their reserves just to survive a single one of those days. Here is the part most people never hear. Khalid did the opposite. He pulled his best horsemen out of the line and held them back. One mobile cavalry reserve kept under his own hand, and for days he refused to spend them. He waited. He read the Roman army the way he had read it at Uhud 11 years earlier, watching for the moment its weight committed too far in one direction. On the 6th day, it did. Khalid took his cavalry wide, drove between the Roman army and its only road of retreat, and pinned the whole mass of it against the same ravines the Romans had trusted to guard their flank. The greatest army of the age had nowhere left to run. Pinned against the cliffs, it came apart. When it was finished, Roman Syria was finished with it. The Byzantine chronicler Theophanes records the Emperor Heraclius saying a last farewell to Syria as he withdrew, because Rome would never hold it again. The Levant was gone, and the man who had decided it was the same man who 11 years before had ridden his cavalry into the back of the Muslim line at Uhud. And what was done to him next is the part that still does not sit right. Everything Khalid had built was now turned against him, not by Rome, by his own side. The new caliph, Umar, removed Khalid from command. By most accounts, the reason had nothing to do with the battlefield. The soldiers had begun crediting the victories to Khalid the man, not to the cause. And Umar would not have an army that loved its general more than the thing it marched for. So he retired the most successful commander of the age at the very height of his success. Read it as jealousy and it looks small. Read it the way Umar likely meant it, and it is colder and smarter. To Umar, it was simple arithmetic. An undefeated man becomes a story the state did not write and cannot edit, and a young empire keeps only the legends it can control. You would think someone would have objected. No one did. Khalid accepted it and kept serving under the men set above him. He died a few years later in his bed in Homs. The man who had survived more than 100 battles is said to have grieved that there was barely a hand's width of his body without the mark of a sword or an arrow, and that after all of it, he was dying quietly, like a worn-out camel instead of on a field. The real question this story leaves behind is not how Khalid won so many times. It is why the one thing he could never do, lose, became the thing that ended him. The greatest general of his age was not retired for failing. He was retired for being too good to leave in command. 100 battles, not a single loss, and a name most people were never taught. Subscribe. Next time, another genius the textbooks decided to skip.